think it's recording. Okay. All right, if everyone can please mute your line while Linda gives her presentation, and then we'll have question and answer at the end.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Blockus. I'm the director of the Office of Undergraduate Research at Mizzou. And actually, it would be helpful if it's all right with you for everyone to kind of go around the virtual room and tell me who they are and what their role is wherever they are. And I don't know if you want to like maybe do a roll call or something with those people, or I don't know how you want to. Because if we just say introduce yourselves and everyone will start talking at once, so maybe you can facilitate that with the people.
Participants, you can see
there.
Oh.
There's on.
Okay.
Okay. Abigail, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, good job.
Okay, I'm Abigail, and I am a grad student at University of Missouri, Kansas City. Just completing my second year of doctoral studies. Yeah.
Amy? Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Hi, I'm Amy Welsh. I'm the database programmer analyst for the Missouri EPSCoR, or Missouri Transects project.
Anna?
Good afternoon. I'm Anna Waldron. I'm the Associate Project Director for Missouri EPSCoR and work closely with Emily and also with Linda.
And I'm Emily. I'm the Project Administrator for Missouri Transect. Jeff?
And the fucking camera's on. Hold on.
His notes, Jeff works at Lincoln on the community team, and he does not have a microphone today. So Emily will watch any chat notes you type in. Great, thank you.
And next is Matt.
He texted and said, sorry, no microphone.
Okay, that's okay. Matt is from SLU. I believe he works with Blockus in the C grant. And he's from the University of another C grant. Next is Paul. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself? Well, Paul works with Joel Birkin. He's a grad student at Missouri S&T. And then Sandra?
Doesn't have a mic. So she's at Danforth, okay.
And then Zach Butler. Zach is a policy analyst at the Institute of Public Policy on the MU campus.
Okay. And then here we have
First, Mark Morgan, School of Natural Resources.
great.
John Walker.
Great, thank you. One of the things I'm wondering. Oh, so let me back up. Those of you who don't have mics, please type in, and Emily will keep track of that and let me know what we've got coming in terms of type notes. One of the things I'm wondering is how many of you will have students, undergraduate students this summer working with you, and of those, how many of those students are going to be brand new to your research group? And if, actually, if we could maybe have everyone type in, and then Emily could just kind of give a summary after they type in. The first, let's see. The slide's not forwarding. Where's Cody when you need him?
Try to keep it.
Oh,
Try that arrow.
Try on your keyboard, maybe you've got control of the screen.
oh yeah. There we go. Okay, so maybe I'll just tell you to advance and that will work. Okay, I'd like us to do a little bit of brainstorming, whoops, on the previous slide. And probably just for simplicity's sake, everyone pick 1, 2, or 3 and jot down a few things, and then we'll share them. So whichever question you want to answer, jot down a few things on your own. And if you don't have a microphone, you can send those to the chat room, and Emily can read those for us. And if you do have a microphone, we'll give you a chance to talk in a minute. Mark, you're kind of the guinea pig here, so you know what you've got
I
to
want
do.
to know if they should send them to you in Mizzou biology. I think send everything to Mizzou biology.
Okay. So let's take number 1. What does the success for an undergraduate student look like? So if you're an undergraduate researcher, what do you think success looks like to you, putting yourself in the shoes of the undergraduate? So what are some of your responses? And if you have a microphone and selected that one, just speak right up. Are we getting any chat responses on that one?
Not yet.
Not yet. Mark, John, since you guys are here in the room, if you're an undergraduate student,
I would say
does
doing
success
what I've been told, to do.
doing what you've been told, okay?
Is a measure of success for an undergraduate student.
Okay, good.
And, kind of recognition among scientists, just the presence of, being in the presence of scientists makes you feel like one of the scientists of sorts.
So
I
doing what
consider-
you're told, being there, okay?
And I would say it would be just getting to understand what real research is like.
Okay. Understanding what research is like. Any other thoughts on what an undergraduate might view as success?
There's a response from Jeff.
Completing tasks in a timely and efficient manner and following correct protocol. Oftentimes, students will say not breaking anything. Okay. All right. And so the next question is, from the faculty mentor's point of view, what would you consider to be success for an undergraduate researcher?
Publishing paper.
Whoa.
Okay.
Man, that is
So John's
high
setting a
level of
high
success.
bar.
You're right.
Um,
I would be satisfied with an undergraduate seeing a bigger picture rather than just the task that they're involved
okay. seeing bigger picture. Paul has typed gaining a solid understanding of the scientific method, how experiments are conducted. And I don't know if that's for question 1 or 2, but that's okay, because that's it can fit into both. And then the other comment is feel that they have gained knowledge and learned new skills that will help them for the career. Other things that as a faculty mentor you believe are measures of success for the student. Jeff types gaining confidence in their emphasis area. Does anyone with a microphone have comments?
I think sometimes faculty are looking to those students to be future graduate students, so sort of a career path into their labs.
Okay.
I think also being able to accomplish set objectives, because like if some objectives had already been set for, say, the summer, and those objectives have been met, then that would be success from the part of the faculty or the grad student.
Okay. Completing a set of objectives. Someone else typed seeing the student, making sure the student graduates and continues on their career path. All right. And then just as a comparison, you as a graduate student or a faculty member or a researcher, how is success in general measured for you? What are some of the things that other people are saying you are successful, and I know that because
Presentations and publications.
okay, publications, presentations,
Training successful students.
training students, getting
Successful
funded, right, training successful students, not just students, but successful students. Good nuance there. And getting funded. Any other comments from people with mics or that are typing in? Okay, so the purpose of doing that exercise, which is, I guess, somewhat challenging in this setting, that's all right.
That was a good experiment.
We'll soldier on. It was a good experiment, all you scientists out there. To remember that what you are particularly being measured on for success is not necessarily what the student's being measured on, and I think we all understand that. John mentioned that it would be successful if a student published a paper, and certainly that's also a measure of success for faculty. It is interesting to me that none of you who were thinking about being a student mentioned publishing papers, because oftentimes we'll see students say, I'm coming to do a summer program, I'm going to publish a paper, and you kind of have to recalibrate those expectations. Certainly that would be a great thing, but you need to talk with them about what's being feasible. Undergraduate students will also say successful is getting a good letter of recommendation. Finding out what kind of career I might be interested in, getting some data, presenting my work. And then faculty mentors, I think it's successful to, as you all mentioned, accomplishing some objectives, getting them to see the bigger picture in science. And I think just having a good experience, however one might define a good experience. But it's something that I guess at the end of the summer or at the end of the time, people feel it was whether it was worth their time. I guess I would also say if I was a faculty mentor, success for me looks like that the time that I've invested in this student comes out on a positive and not a negative end in terms of the time that I've invested in this student. So if we go to the next slide. And we have another brainstorming session. All of the slides here are not brainstorming slides, so don't worry that we're going to have to kind of work our way through this. But I would like you to take a moment and think about expectations. The student working with you, what do they expect from you? And then conversely, what do you expect from your undergraduate students? So we'll just take a moment, you can jot a few things down, and then we'll share those. I guess I should have prefaced those comments with, when you're typing your comments, let us know if you think it's an expectation of the student or an expectation of the mentor. So for example, Jeff typed in guidance and direction. I'm assuming that is a student would expect that from his or her mentor. And then guidance and direction with clear objectives. Leadership, I'm not sure if that's, if faculty expect leadership from students or students expect leadership from the faculty. I suppose it can go both ways. Constructive comments on his or her research topic. I'm assuming the student would like feedback. You're saying the student would expect some feedback from the faculty mentor. Those of you with microphones, can you verbalize some other expectations that people have?
I think students expect things like patience, just sort of the human side of it.
Okay. Students expect mentor to have a plan, not making it up as they go along. Of course, one of the reason why we're doing this is to compare what students expect and how that might be different from what mentors expect. And I think that comment about students expecting mentor to have a plan is a good demonstration of mentors do not expect that, mentors expect that students will be able to understand that doing science is not just following a book recipe all the time and everything's figured out. So, whereas the student might expect things to be really laid out for them, a faculty member expects the student to be flexible and innovative and improvise at times when needed, as appropriately in writing down what they're improvising. Expect the faculty mentor to have passion. Paul writes, I expect students to take a leading role with their research. It's important for them to work through the goals and objectives of their research as opposed to being told to do this. So you expect the student to have ownership of their project, take responsibility for problem solving. We have another comment of students expect their mentor to have enough funds to support their work till the end. I think that might be more relevant with grad students than undergrads, but it certainly, a student does expect that they'll be able to have chemicals and supplies and other things so they can do their project. Jeff types in encouragement and patience. The student expects that from their faculty mentor. Other verbal comments? All right. One of the things I would encourage you to do is to ask your students who are working with you, what are some of their expectations that they have of you? And just kind of, not that you're promising you're going to meet all those expectations, but to just get a feeling for what they're looking for in the research experience and with the mentor. And if we could go on to the next slide. One of the things that I'd like you to think about, and we won't share this, but I do, before we go on to the next slide, want you to just spend a moment thinking about, is as students join your research team, and you have certain expectations for them, some of which we've already discussed, how do you communicate what those expectations are to the student? So we have 3 little baby potato heads here, eagerly waiting to find out what the expectations are. How are you going to let them know? So just take a moment for you to think about that. Okay. John and Mark, since you are here and I can see you and pressure you into responding, how do you let students know what your expectations are?
So I do it in 2 ways. I try to set up a formal, at least weekly meeting where it's a one-on-one, at a set time, and then informally just chatting with them and other folks that are in the lab on a daily basis if possible.
Okay.
I found the writing things down is very helpful. Rather than telling them, often that's not that people often have a tendency to either be distracted or forget or can't remember properly. And so having things written down.
So what are some examples of expectations you would write down?
Some things would be like perfunctory, like, being on time, being responsible, the things that you would expect for normal, kinds of behavior. It should occur. The other types of expectations would be, I would expect you to take initiative, in the project, and have a good attitude, and want to learn, that type of thing. Those are not necessarily written down, but then a lot of times those are communicated through face-to-face interaction or body language. Okay, so you have a way of communicating in that way to kind of give a sense of approval or encouragement through either talking or other forms of communication with the student. So then in other words, they get the message.
Okay, great. Can we go to the next slide? So here's some of the things that I've written down, some things you've mentioned. When you're talking with a student about joining your research group, you may want to specifically at that point in time tell them what your expectations are. Are your expectations that they work in your research group for a minimum of 3 semesters? Are your expectations that they will not get their own project until they've done X, Y, and Z? And what are those X, Y, and Z things? Up front, you may let them know before they decide to join your lab what your expectations are, so that way they know, I'm not going to be able to fulfill these expectations. They can move along. Or it may help socialize them ahead of time to, hey, I really want to join this research group. They have very high expectations for me. They're going to help me get to where I want to be. This is great. I really get a better feel of what I'm entering into. We talked about verbally from a faculty member, either formally, as John said, formally with them, or informally. One of the things to think about is how often do you want to do that? And we'll get back to that in a minute. Others in the research team, perhaps you as a faculty member are not their day-to-day supervisor, but it's someone else in the research team. And so they'll be working with them and discussing with them. One thing specifically I want to say about that number 3 is if there are multiple people working with the student, or if there's a day-to-day supervisor that's not the PI, making sure that it's very clear what those lines of communications are, what that chain of command is, so that a student understands who they need to be talking to, who they need to be getting feedback from, what the relationship is. Maybe it's really a co-mentoring relationship, but if that's the case, then you may want to think about having 3-way conversations instead of just you communicate with the student and graduate student communicates with the student, and now there's mixed messages going on. So just being clear about those lines of communications. Mark mentioned written expectations. I know some research groups have different rules. A lot of these are safety oriented, but they are written down. And so when you walk into the research team, you're handed a list of different rules. The list keeps growing as different things come up, and that's fine. What are your written expectations in terms of doing email in the lab or communicating by email? Do you have any kind of formal evaluation that is done in a written form? The other thing is, and Mark mentioned this, people just kind of are there and learn and know, but think purposefully about what kind of culture does your research group have and who else is involved in socializing the student. So for example, you may have certain expectations, but if the other undergraduates, their peers around, are not living up to those expectations, is the student learning bad habits or not the right habits? Or on the other hand, if you have always undergraduates in your lab, then your new students that are joining the research group can use them as role models. Let's go on to the next slide. I think a lot of times people don't think about how important the interpersonal interactions are in research team meetings. You can really utilize research team meetings to help socialize the students, demonstrate appropriate behavior, praise appropriate behavior. But it's really good for undergraduates, especially if it's their first time going to a research meeting, to think about it and let them know what to expect, what happens during research lab meetings. Do they need to come prepared, or is it a fly by the seat of the pants kind of environment? What do you expect of them specifically? They're going to be walking into an environment where they're going to be postdocs, grad students, lab techs, who are very active in the conversation. And you can let them know how active they need to be, how much of the paper they need to read or not read, how much they need to prepare for, just so they're not surprised. Also, you may have a situation where you have some very verbal grad students that will take over the conversation, and maybe they feel it's not their place to talk or discuss or bring up new ideas or ask questions. So I think letting the students know ahead of time what to expect is a good thing to do. Think about next time you go into your research team meeting, kind of look around, get a sense of the room. How would an undergraduate interpret that? Are there different things your lab does that can either be very supportive or not so supportive in a lab meeting? If someone had a really good week getting really nice, clean data, do you praise them? If someone broke a piece of equipment, do you publicly shame them? Is that the best way to handle it? And maybe it is, I don't know. It really kind of depends on your research group and who broke whatever equipment. You know, 10th time they broke it, maybe public shaming is appropriate, I don't know. But think about how this team meeting may reflect upon the way you mentor students, and if it lines up with how you would like to mentor students. Also, make sure that your undergraduates have an opportunity to debrief after your lab meeting. That could be with their day-to-day supervisor, it could be with you. Oftentimes, especially new undergrads are going to be reluctant to ask questions, either questions about the science that's being discussed or just questions in general. And so perhaps a private conversation later is appropriate. Perhaps it's a conversation to follow up on, if you're reviewing an article and there's a piece they didn't understand, give them a little more time to go back over it, and then meet with them individually to talk about that particular paper now that they've had a chance to digest it a little more. So there's lots of ways that you can use your research team to role model what great behavior is. If you have an upper class student that's making a presentation that did a really great job, it's easy to say, hey, Susie, great job. Brenda, new undergrad, next semester, we want you to make a presentation. So she knows what's on the radar screen and what's going to be happening in the future. Any comments, suggestions thus far on other ways to help socialize students into your research setting? Either if you want to speak up or if you want to chat.
So Linda, I have a question related to labs that have multiple undergraduates working in them for the summer. Would you say any of this needs to be tailored differently if let's say a faculty member has 2 to 4 undergraduates and they might not be able to have the time for those individual meetings?
Yes, I think a lot depends on the makeup of your lab, and one thing you could do is just make a quick organizational chart on the back of a napkin. And it may make sense that undergraduate A is working with one graduate student and it's a similar project to another graduate student, and maybe it's not a lab meeting, but it's a research group meeting, and then you do another meeting with another group. Maybe you use lab meetings just for some general overall things. It really kind of depends. Some faculty will have special lab meetings just for their undergrads in the summer because it's an efficiency thing. We know that this paper is going to be a little tough for the undergrads, so we're going to have a special meeting just for them to talk about it, and then we'll move into the larger lab meeting. So it really kind of depends, I think, on the personnel you have in your group at any given time and what's going to be most efficient for that group. Does that kind of answer or go along with what you're thinking, Anna?
Yes, thank you.
John?
I was going to say, if there's age happy hour, always helps socialize people. If they're not, lunch, just getting outside the lab.
Yes, so getting outside the lab is a great opportunity. Certainly, social hour sounds better to me than happy hour, John. I'm just going to put that in there, that you may have undergraduates that are underage and or undergraduates that going to a bar is not, even if they're of age, is not maybe what they want to do. And you may have grad students that in that way as well. So certainly doing a potluck lunch or on this campus walking over to Buck's Ice Cream or something like that is a good thing. And you can decide if during that time are you going to talk any science or not? And maybe taking a 2-hour lunch and talking science over lunch is a great idea. Or maybe it's an hour lunch and it's just social and there's no science talk allowed. Again, it kind of depends on how you want to socially structure your group at any one given time. Any other comments or chats? Do we have any written? Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. The point of this slide is to help you remember that sometimes students will have a difficult time knowing what their progress is. Are they making progress? Maybe in their mind they are, because now after 10 weeks, they finally mastered how to make a solution or something. And maybe that's not real progress in your mind. Or they may be doing a whole lot of things, but just really don't have any sense on how far they've come. Sometimes if there's other undergraduates in the group, they can use those as comparison to kind of figure out how far they've come. But you also have to be very careful because those comparisons may not be appropriate for them, especially if you're in a situation where you've had a student at your own institution working in the lab for 2 years and a summer intern comes in and has no experience. The undergrad that's been working with you for 2 years is really not necessarily a fair comparison. And I guess I would say it's kind of like having your own children. Yes, you're going to compare them, but there's many times you just know you shouldn't compare them. So you may not want to verbally compare them to each other if you know it's not really a fair comparison. So it's important to give them that feedback and let them know how you think they're coming along. That is something the students really do like and appreciate. Good. Next slide. It's also important to communicate with them to help them revise their expectations and your expectations. The student might be ready to move on to an independent project, and they don't know what to do, what really the next step is. Maybe you haven't really been explicit. Maybe they know they need to move on to their own project, but don't fully understand why they're not ready. So you may need to have that conversation with them of, sorry, we're not going to be able to let you do your own project with these expensive chemicals until you demonstrate to us that you know how to do these certain skills and techniques. They might be ready to take on more intense projects, but for a variety of reasons, especially through the academic year, it might not be a good time for them. Maybe it's time they need to kind of step back for a bit. Perhaps they're getting ready to go on a study abroad program, so rather than start a new project, they kind of step back a bit. Maybe they're applying to graduate school, so your expectation of having them do a lot of intensive work on a project may just not be feasible for the next month. Having those conversations with them to recalibrate those expectations and what your goals are for them, I think is important. Also, students don't necessarily know why things in the lab aren't working in terms of their progressing. If you tell them, that's great, that'll help them understand and decide if this is a good experience for them. If it's you're not progressing because you're not putting in enough time, and they're like, well, I don't have the time to put in, well then hopefully you can mutually agree to that you both kind of move along, versus the student just feeling horrible, not knowing they're not making the expectations that you've set for them, and it's kind of this approach avoidance thing, which I'm sure many of you have had. The student just kind of stops coming around because they don't know how to end the relationship. So I think having these regular discussions with them will help you understand where they are, what they're willing to put in time and intellectual energy, what they're able to, what your expectations are. Maybe you are perfectly happy with them doing the support work in the lab, and they may be perfectly happy in doing that. And you pushing them to do their own project isn't really what they want to do. And, you know, it may be, well, you know, Susie does a really good job at these regular tasks. That's good for me, so maybe we don't push her along. Or maybe we need to help her find a different research group to work in because it's more longer interest, whatever the case may be. So just some things to think about there. And next slide. So the point of this slide is to remind you to have regular feedback with students, especially in the summer. Time goes by really quick. Your summer consists of May, June, July, and August. Students that work in our summer program, their summer is June and July. So whereas you may think, oh, we still have 3 more weeks. No, I'm leaving next week, the program's over. So you need to kind of compare timelines. I think if you have regular meetings with students that they expect you're going to have a weekly meeting if that's what you decide to do, then it's a lot easier to give them constructive feedback versus not having meetings. Then finally, when they get called into their office, it's because of bad news or a discussion. You finally need to sit down and have that talk with them, whatever that talk may be. But if you have these regular discussions with them, I think it's a lot easier to take care of any problems or issues. All right, next slide. So those of you who are starting with students this summer, it's a good idea to remember where the student's at, what their goals may be. We have 4 different potato heads, and as you can see, they're all very different in many different ways. So the students will have different goals, be at different points in their own career and maturity. Many students, especially summer students, don't necessarily come in with specific goals. Or the goals, yes, they're specific, but they're pretty broad and vague. My goal is to get a better feel for my career. My goal is to present research. My goal is to whatever. So understand that the students may not be real sophisticated in articulating what their goals are. So you might want to help them with that. And I've got a slide coming up that will help. I've printed here some different open-end questions you might use. These are also on your handout, so you don't need to scribble them down. But just some prompts to maybe help the student articulate where they are and to help you understand where the student is. So if we can have the next slide. So this is a list of learning games that David Lopato and his colleagues have come up with that are outcomes from undergraduate research. If you're interested in more information on this, I can give you some different articles and citations if you want to email me. But this is a list, and you have this on your printout, on your handout, that you might want to share with your student and say, hey, of these different learning games, what are some things that are important to you this summer? What do you want to get from the summer experience? Again, some of them are kind of vague, but at least it gives you a better feel for what the student might be interested in. And or gives you a feel for, hey, here are a couple goals with this student, either new student or continuing student. This summer, we are specifically going to focus on one or more of these goals. So you can use this as a tool to help you plan some goals for the summer. All right, next slide. When you have new students come into your group, you need to spend some time getting them oriented where things are, obviously safety issues, what space is their space. When you have multiple people, it's really good to make sure that everybody knows who this new student is, what their role is for the summer, what their goals are for the summer. Here's Susie, she's here to wash dishes and water plants for us this summer. Here's Brenda, she's here to do an independent project. She'll be here 40+ hours a week. So that way folks in your research team have a better understanding. It's important that you know how to get in touch with them and they know how to get in touch with you. If you or members of your lab team are going to be out of the lab for a significant time in the summer, think about that ahead of time and let them know. If your whole lab is leaving for a conference and they're going to be on their own for a week, make plans and let them know ahead of time. Don't surprise them the day before. Also sit down with your schedule and their schedule, and you may find that you're going to be out at a conference the week that their abstract is due over the summer. So knowing that ahead of time will help you plan. Certainly, as you're getting them oriented to the lab and you're getting oriented to them, again, try to get an understanding of where that student is at. But you may not want to sit down and quiz them all day long. Give them a little bit of a breather. So that may take a couple of days to do. And then set some goals. Next slide, please. So again, just a reminder to have some regular meetings. And let them know those individual meetings, what are your goals and expectations? And maybe the grad student that's working with them will attend or something. John, you say you have weekly meetings with your undergraduate students. What are your goals for those meetings?
Usually partly their project.
Okay, so where they are in their project, in an environment that's more private and supportive rather than in front of the whole lab group. So that way, if the student has questions or problems, they can discuss them with you without airing all their issues or concerns in front of the whole group. You know, it may be that another lab member is hogging a piece of equipment and they want to share that with you, or it may be they still really don't understand the math involved in making this solution, but you know, that's not something you necessarily want to call out in the middle of a lab meeting to you know, let everybody else in the lab know that you know, they didn't quite get the math, so we need to work with them on that. It's also very good for you to let them know when they have problems or questions, who do they go and talk to? Because students want to know who to go talk to. And depending on how you define a little problem, you know, it may be something they should go talk to the grad student with at first, or maybe the lab technician. It just kind of depends. All right, next slide. And then as you go along and as the students go along, I'd encourage you to help the students do some self-evaluation and help them think about what skills and techniques have they mastered and gained. And maybe in their mind, learning this specific skill technique is not really a big deal, but you know that that's a skill or technique that it usually takes grad students 3 months to figure out, but they've figured it out quickly. Or maybe it is taking them 3 months and they need to know that that's kind of normal. Pointing out the different scientific knowledge they've gained, different professional skills they've gained, talking with them about the program they're in, if they're participating in seminars. I encourage students, if they want feedback, to ask the faculty mentor in the context of, I want to go on to graduate school, or I want to go on and do more research, or I want to go to medical school, or whatever the case may be. Given what my goals are, what do you see as my strengths, and what are areas for improvement? And so then it may be, hey, if you want to go to grad school, you need to be doing a better job keeping up with reading the literature. Or if you really want to be successful in research, you need to be working on a lab notebook that's readable to everybody, not just yourself, or whatever the case may be. And also using that time to point out their strengths. You're really good at reading the literature, but you aren't spending enough time doing your experiments, whatever the case may be with the student. Next slide. Very important to take the time, the purposeful time, to wrap things up with students. Talk, if they've made a presentation about their work, talk with them about that experience, about planning, making a poster, presenting the poster. What worked well, what can they do better next time? Again, as we discussed, review the skills and knowledge that they've gained, areas for improvement. Certainly, if they're leading your research group, you want to discuss the current status of the project. It's really important, even for students that are continuing on with you, to just periodically take, I would say at least the end of each semester, each summer, to have this sit-down wrap-up meeting with them to discuss where they've been, what they've done, and what the next long-term steps are for them. It's a really good way to benchmark things for them. If, heaven forbid, next semester they decide not to return to school or something, or leave for a different lab, you've had that conversation so you know where their project is. Your publication presentation policies, this is a really good opportunity to remind them if you have a visiting student in your lab for the summer and they want to present their project back at their home institution, what are your policies on that? Do they need to check with you first, or can they just go ahead and do it? Whatever that may be. And also, to end on a positive note, take some time to think about what they've contributed to the research team, not just scientifically, but also perhaps in the social context of your lab. You know, Susie, it was really great having you this summer. It was really nice to have someone come in with your sunny disposition and also asking questions to remind us about some things that we haven't thought about for the time. Susie, you know, I really appreciate the fact that you organized and alphabetized our journals, or whatever else they may have done that has contributed to the research team. Make sure you take the time to point that out for them. All right, we have 2 more slides, and one is the ending slide. So really, this is the last content slide. This is just a brief listing of the 10 practices of undergraduate research mentors. You have an article that was sent to you, which I think is a really, really good article. We're not going to go through this article in any depth today, but one of the things that I would encourage the Missouri Transect group to do is perhaps when you're meeting as a group, have everybody read that article, and then as a roundtable discussion, have each table decide on what 2 topics they think are the most important. Again, there's no right or wrong answer to this, but I think it's a good prompt for discussion. And some of the table may feel that building a community is really important to having a successful experience with students, whereas other people may feel that the most important thing is to show personal interest or to teach them technical skills. So anyway, it's just a good opportunity to have a discussion. And those of you may want to do this in your own research groups. Perhaps you want to share this article amongst your graduate students and postdocs, lab techs, whoever, and say, you know, here's a really great article about undergraduate research mentoring. Here's some things. What do we in this research group do a good job with, and what maybe is 1 or 2 things we could focus on doing a better job with. So this is a really nice outline to help you enhance and improve the experience for your mentees, and also I think for you, because you know, if you have a happy mentee, then you're going to be a happier mentor, I would hope. And last slide, my email address is on the lower left side, and I just also want to point out the CUR.org website. CUR is Council on Undergraduate Research. It's a professional organization, and it has a lot of really good resources. So you might check that out. There are conferences every 2 years if you are really interested in getting more involved with that. And graduate students, if you are interested in careers where you're going to have significant interaction with undergraduates, this is a really great networking organization for you to help you land jobs at private liberal arts colleges or other institutions that really put a premium on undergraduate interaction. And with that, questions, comments, discussion, either verbally or if you want to put up the chat, see if we got any chatting.
So you're going to make these slides available to us?
Yes, actually they'll be on the video. Any verbal comments, questions, discussions, hints you have you'd like to share?
I have a question.
Yes.
Would you have any insights or thoughts in terms of dealing with graduate students that are from underrepresented groups?
I think a lot of these principles would apply to graduate students as well. I think outlining what your expectations are. One of the point number 2 on the research article that I've shared is clear scaffolded expectations. So you might say, hey, my expectation is that all graduate students will publish 3 papers before they graduate. Well, that's kind of long-term, and you're not expecting that the first year, but helping all graduate students understand, here are the expectations along the way. We're going to get there. But my expectation for this semester is that you master this technique, learn about this, think about these things, and then as we go on, we'll continue to build upon those expectations. So I think it's being clear, it's giving them feedback. These are things that you're doing great on. I see that you're doing this, this, and this. In order to be successful, here's some other behaviors, skills, attitudes that will help make you successful.
You didn't say anything about handling social conflict. That'll be case specific, but that also is a part of this process where students don't belong with each other.
Right,
They're doing your
right.
job, they're doing their job as far as your relationship with them and their relationship with you, but they don't get along very well sometimes amongst themselves. Trying to handle that, of course, there's no magic pill here or bullet, that we can insert or tap on somebody's head,
Right.
To cease this particular activity, but it is difficult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what, so if it's hey, Susie doesn't clean her lab bench and it's really getting under Brenda's skin, then that's a sort of lab rule kind of thing that we need to clean your lab bench.
And that would be one category.
That would be one category of things.
Others would not be quite so easy.
And I think one of the things as a mentor that you need to be very careful about is going to Susie and saying, hey, Brenda told me she doesn't like this or that. And then all of a sudden you've thrown Brenda under the bus, which maybe Brenda wants you to do that. But maybe Brenda was telling you in confidence because she was asking you for advice on how to deal with this. So before you go and talk to somebody, especially about another person, you might ask that person, hey, would it be okay if I told Susie that you've complained about this or we need to, or that you've noticed this or that. So yeah, human relations, no matter if you're in the lab or office or elsewhere, you're going to have those things. So that's having some clear rules if it's a rule-oriented thing. Making sure that the students in your lab have someone they can go to help them navigate some of these social waters. And maybe that's not you. Maybe there's another person in your lab that's really good at doing that. Knowing that if they come to you to try and figure out how to navigate those social waters, that you're not going to immediately turn around and take away their trust because now you've made this. You were trying to help, but now you've made the situation worse. So yeah, that can be a real challenge. All right. All right. Paul's getting back to studying. Jeff doesn't have questions. Any other comments?
And I had to go to another meeting. She said, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Anything you need to say to the group before?
No.
They sign off? You're good. All right, I guess they're all good. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time. I think I will put together a very quick Qualtrics survey and send it to Emily just to get feedback from you all. And thank you for your patience with the audio and typing. This wasn't as interactive as I thought it might be, but it was a real good experience to give that a try. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Bye. Thank you.
And one o'clock. Timing.
Yeah, well.